Well, good morning, everyone. We have reached 9:30, so we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And I'd like to welcome everybody to today's meeting. Before we get started, I would like at this time to ask our interpreter, Ruth Monroy, to walk through how to access our interpretation services for today's meeting. Ruth, please proceed.
Yes, good morning. I will repeat the message in English. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, que es el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular o tableta, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. To use the interpreting feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are located and click on the interpretation icon, the world. Then select your language. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone or tablet, please press the ellipses, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I will now ask our clerk to confirm that we have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Okay, again, welcome to the February 8th meeting of the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, where I talk. Of course, would like to thank staff for all of their efforts in pulling this meeting together, and all those members of the public joining us here in person and by phone today. Very briefly, want to talk about how this meeting will work today. We will take in-person public comment followed by virtual public comment. And if you are a member of the public here in the room, please submit a speaker slip to the clerk. And for those that are joining us virtually, please continue to raise your virtual hand at the appropriate time. I want to make sure that everyone knows that public participation is possible, both in person and via Zoom. Please take the opportunity to participate in today's meeting. I will now ask Sandag's financial programming analyst, Michael Turlip, to provide a quick reminder on how the public and member comments will work, please. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Chair Frankel. We will take both in-person and virtual public comments as noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. In addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email you receive upon registering. When public comments are called for on an item, on the Zoom platform, click on the Raise Hand icon in the Zoom toolbar. The chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you are participating by telephone, press *9. If the chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of Sandag's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made a part of today's meeting record. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Okay, we're going to jump into our agenda here, and we will begin with item 1, which is public comments and communications. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the committee on an item not on today's agenda. This will be limited to 5 public speakers. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on this item?
Chair, we do not have any public comments on this item.
Thank you so much. Member comments? No, I'm seeing none. Excellent. We will now move on to item 2, which is our agency report, which will be provided today by Mr. Dijon.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee members. So before I give you my update, I want to show you a short video of our 2022 annual review. Transit plays a huge role in many of the projects we continue to deliver for this region, and I hope that you'll be proud of what we've accomplished as we are. So let's take a look.
2022 was a transformational year for the San Diego region. Through the Sandag Regional Plan, we set the vision for the future of transportation every 4 years. One of our top priorities for decades, moving the low sand tracks off the Del Mar Bluffs, has gained the attention of the nation.
We're going to make sure the second busiest rail corridor in America, connecting San Diego and Los Angeles, is going to be open and running for a long time.
Thanks to the leadership of California Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins and Congressman Mike Levin, Sandag received major state and federal funding for the low sand corridor. The national spotlight also shined on another Sandag priority project, the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. As the recipient of the largest infra grant in the country, this project will provide much-needed relief to our current land ports by facilitating a new state-of-the-art border crossing between the U.S. and Mexico.
We are pleased to award the California DOT $150 million for the Otay Mesa East Port project.
And this announcement was made on the heels of an historic toll revenue sharing agreement.
The work of Sandag and the can-do attitude of the people of both sides of the border is so remarkable.
Sandag also continues to work on creating a direct transit link to the San Diego International Airport and a central mobility hub to ensure a fast and convenient connection to every part of the region. We've come a long way. A year after celebrating the completion of one of the largest infrastructure projects in our region's history, the Mid-Coast Trolley extension of the UC San Diego Blue Line has already served more than 2 million riders. And we doubled down on our investment to equity with the launch of the Youth Opportunity Pass pilot program, providing free transit passes for riders 18 and under. And ridership numbers are through the roof, with up to 92% monthly increase in youth transit rides since the pilot started. Sandag is also connecting people to key resources through data-driven planning, building, and funding that will benefit our residents today and for generations to come. We launched the Digital Equity Program to ensure everyone has access to high-speed and affordable internet. And as part of our Housing Acceleration Program, we've partnered with state and local agencies, community-based organizations, and affordable housing developers to promote equitable housing throughout our region. Sandag is dedicated to making sure our communities have safe transportation options for people who walk, bike, and roll. Our regional bike network had a record-breaking year. In 2022, we opened 11 miles of new bikeways and broke ground on nearly 5 more. And Sandag is thinking outside the box. At our first ever Sandag Community Fair, we showcased our request for innovative concepts, a unique collaboration with the nation's brightest innovators to create cutting-edge transportation solutions. And we're just getting started. Sandag is delivering key projects and programs through TransNet and our other grant programs to improve how people get around, protect endangered species and their habitats, and provide mobility options for aging populations and individuals with disabilities. At Sandag, we hold ourselves accountable to the communities we serve. With more than 70 ongoing projects in every corner of the county, we are committed to creating a San Diego region where every person who visits, works, and lives can thrive.
Thank you. So as you may know, we are celebrating the 35th year anniversary of the original TransNet measure. This year, we want to ensure that everyone in the region knows where these dollars are being spent to benefit our communities. Personally, actually, I'm also celebrating my 35th year working anniversary. I started in 1988 at KPMG, and Sandag was one of my largest clients. In fact, I helped the Director of Finance and Administration put together the first financial statements for the commission. It's amazing that we started with about 100 million annually. Now we're up to about 425 million in 35 years. So it's actually great to be part of this, and I feel very connected to TransNet. On the regional plan, staff have been working on the amendment to remove the regional road usage charge from the 2021 plan over the last few months. The board directed staff to complete this work within 1 year, and staff is on track. We are planning to come back to the board before summer so that we can take action on the amendment. Then it will be up to the state to take it from there. At the same time, we are also beginning work on the 2025 regional plan. And tomorrow, February 9th, we will host a workshop with the working groups to discuss the kickoff of this work. Moving on to the Del Mar Bluffs, the good news is that the work we have been doing there continued to protect the tracks during the recent storms, but the need to move the tracks off the bluffs remains urgent. While our team moves quickly on the long-term realignment, we are also taking every opportunity to advance other critical projects on the corridor like San Diego. This is not a matter of either or, but all of the above. It is critical that we work as one region to advance these projects together. We are continuing our discussions with our state and federal partners to keep the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project moving forward. We are also working on the airport transit connection and central mobility hub. And planning work is underway for both the Blue Line enhancement and the Purple Line projects. The board also recently authorized SANDAG to advance our Smart Corridors project by moving forward to the 3 projects selected through the request for innovative concepts. We'll work with Caltrans to select 1 or more of the corridors on which to advance a pilot project this year. Last year, the board adopted a regional Vision Zero resolution. In a major step forward, SANDAG recently received $2.5 million in Safe Streets and Roads for All, a federal grant funding to develop a regional comprehensive safety action plan. We are also excited to share that we were awarded more than $4 million from the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program to fully fund completion of the University Bikeway project. When completed in 2026, it will provide substantial active transportation and bus corridor improvements in San Diego's urban core, including the communities of City Heights, Eastern San Diego, and La Mesa. Lastly, I want to congratulate our Manager of Strategic Capital Funding and Transit Program, Ariana Zerneden, who will be retiring soon. Ariana has been with the agency for 15 years. She started in 2008 as an administrative analyst with the business service team, and throughout her career, she has supported the business service team, the TransNet and legislative affairs team, and the financial planning, budgeting, and grants department. Ariana has been the ITOC committee coordinator for the past decade. In fact, I see Ariana as kind of the face of ITOC. And the one thing I really appreciate about Ariana the last 10 years is she does not have the word no in her vocabulary. In fact, I know that as much as we put on her plate, she takes it and runs with it. So I really, truly am going to miss Ariana. Stuart, I know that about 4 years ago when Lisa Kondracht-Dolphin left the finance team, you were concerned that how are we going to manage? Hopefully you've seen that we've managed with Sam and Marcus, and we know that Ariana, although we wish her the best going forward, we have a great team. Zara, Michael, and entire Susan's team will be there to support the ITOC, so please don't worry about that. So we wish you well in your next chapter, Ariana. I think we'll have one more meeting with you in March to say our final goodbyes. But you'll certainly be missed, and I really appreciate all you have done for SANDAG, the agency, and ITOC. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dujon. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We have no public comments on this item.
Okay, any members' comments on this item? Yes, Pedro.
We're not worried. Suzanne is worried.
That's right.
But congratulations, Ariana.
Sunny?
Well, I just want to thank you. First of all, congratulations with all the success you're having. It's wonderful to see that. Happy anniversary to you and to SANDAG. Ariana, we got to do something for you next time because I just heard the sad news and we're going to miss you. There's going to be really a big gap. You have enabled and empowered your, team here to do what needs to be done, but it's just not going to be the same without you. So thank you. Thank you for all your service.
Any other member comments? I'm sure we'll have more acknowledgements and goodbyes next month. Everybody will be well prepared, Ariana. Okay, we will move on to our consent agenda today. And we do have 5 items on consent. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, we do not have any public comments on consent.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the members, any member comment on today's consent calendar? No, if seeing none, do I have a motion?
I do have some questions I wanted to ask on item 5. So.
Yes, please proceed, Tony.
Okay, I just was looking at the balances here and the county of San Diego. This is on attachment 5, caught my eye with a high balance remaining. And just wanted to know if there is, maybe we can have the county come and explain a little bit more about what they're doing in a future meeting or something like that, unless you have an explanation.
Yes, it's in the process of being coordinated. So as soon
Okay.
as we find out, we will add it to the agenda.
Okay. I did notice the city also has a high balance, but they're here, so we'll ask them when, maybe they can address that as well, so. Let's see, the other thing was also the smart growth program. Again, there was a big unspent balance there. Is there an explanation, what's happening with that?
Can I defer
This is
to?
attachment 6. Sorry. Marcus, is that?
I get these figures from the Smart Growth Department, so I don't want to speak on their behalf. So I can ask that question and follow up with you.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was one particular entity or several, you know, or what, why, you know, there's a large amount of funds still unspent. So yeah, if you could get back to us, that would be great.
Yeah, we can get the information and get back
Yeah.
to you.
Okay, so same thing on attachment 7, I guess, you know, the 72% County of San Diego. So I think we'll hopefully get an explanation for all of those. Okay, those were all my questions for the consent.
Thank you, Sunny. Any other member comments on the consent calendar today? No, seeing nothing further, do I have a motion?
I move.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Sunny and a second by Stuart. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. For real estate right-of-way acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Yes.
For licensed civil traffic engineer, Michael Kenny.
Yes.
For contractor construction, Vice Chair Orso Delgado.
Yes.
For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Yes.
For finance and budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Yes.
For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Yes.
And CEO private sector, Sunny House.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That item passes unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll now move on to item 8. This is actions by the Transportation Committee and Board of Directors on TransNet related agenda items, and it will be presented by Zara. Zara, please proceed.
Thank you. The Transportation Committee canceled meetings in January, but the board met on January 13th and 27th. At its January 13th meeting, SANDAG Board of Directors conducted its officer election for calendar years 2023 to 2024, and the board voted to elect Supervisor Vargas to the position of the SANDAG Board Chair, Council President El Rivera to the position of Vice Chair, and Mayor Huebner to the position of Second Vice Chair. The board also adopted 2023 RTIP Amendment Number 1. The first reading of proposed amendments to the transit ordinance regarding ITOC membership and selection process was presented to the board, and the board voted unanimously to conduct the first reading of the ordinance by reading the title and waiving full recitation of ordinance for the first and future readings. ITOC's proposed amendments to transit ordinance and ITOC bylaws were taken to the board on January 27th for approval. However, unfortunately, the item did not pass, and it did not receive required two-thirds tally, nor the two-thirds weighting vote, and again, as mentioned, the item did not pass. Additionally, Transportation Committee adopted the federal performance measure targets for performance management rules 1, 2, and 3 regarding fixing America's surface transportation. Staff presented these at your November meeting. That concludes the month's updates. Also, as a reminder, Stuart Halpern and Dustin Fuller's terms end this May. We have published a notice or public notice to advertise these positions on SANDAG's website. If you know anyone who might be interested, please share the information with them, and they can contact me if they have any question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Zara, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, we do not.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the members. Any comments? Obviously, I think you were all aware of the unfortunate outcome of the second reading of the ordinance. We fell just short of receiving 2/3. And I know that we are going to have a discussion item next month to talk about potential pathways forward. So they just want to make you aware that that will be coming back to us. But of course, happy to hear any other member comments at this time. Sunny.
I just wanted to express my disappointment in the way the vote was taken, and there was no explanation why it didn't pass. Whatever the dynamics of the board are, we spent a lot of time and effort trying to put together an amendment to make sure that ITALK is performing and meeting the needs and the desires of the taxpayers as an oversight committee. And as things change at SANDAG and improve and evolve, this committee needs to evolve to keep up with that. So not knowing why it didn't pass, because there were no questions, very minor number of questions. I'm just wanted to make sure I put it on record that this is really disappointing. So thank you.
Thank you, Sunny, and for all of your work to get us to that point. Sunny, I think, did the lion's share of the heavy lifting to get us to a board vote, which is not easy. So thank you, Sunny, for all your support in that.
All of you, I mean, everyone was involved in this, and we had tons of discussions, and for it to just not be passed without an explanation. So I am looking forward to hearing how we're going to move forward with that. So thank you.
Any other member comments on this item? Michael?
In watching the video of the meeting, there seemed to be a dialogue point that pivoted around a rather unfortunate typo. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, it actually wasn't a typo. I misspoke. It was a cleanup to the bylaws, the ITALK bylaws. But you're right. Yeah, the conversation went in the wrong direction after that. But really what we were there for was not to make that change. That ordinance amendment had already happened back in 2021.
And there's no procedural way to address that. It's just the vote has been taken and we have to go back with another amendment.
Well, as Chair Frankel mentioned, if you'd like, we can bring an item back for your discussion. Today, we don't have a discussion item on your agenda for this, but if the ITALK chooses to bring the item forward again to the board, either as another standalone item or as part of the overall amendments that will be brought forward at some time in the future, then those are a couple options available.
Thank you.
Pedro?
Michael, I think the issue that came about and that got a little confused is that I believe that the increase that happened about 3 years ago for the administrative 1% to 2%, that got wrapped into this discussion and it has nothing to do with it. So somehow we'll need to get that clarified. And when we have the discussion next month, my opinion is that we should go first and not try to lump it into a global change of the bylaws, because I think that's going to be a lot more difficult for us. So that's just my humble opinion today.
Stuart?
Yeah, I think my observation was it seemed as if things kind of started going down a weird and unfortunate track with the confusion about the 2%, 1%. But then it seemed to go a little bit in the direction of, I'd heard some commentary, if I'm remembering correctly, that it was the taxpayers passed the ordinance and so we shouldn't be changing the ordinance. I don't know if anybody else remembers hearing some commentary in that regard. So, I think it illustrates, to Sunny's point, I think it illustrates a number of things. First, it's unfortunate, I think that, particularly with 7 new members, but not necessarily just those 7, the board actually doesn't seem to have a great understanding of what ITALK actually is. In fact, that we represent the taxpayers right? So that's sort of part one. So we need ongoing education, I think, of board members as to who we are, what we do. The second thing is, to the extent that there was objection about changing the ordinance because the taxpayers had approved it and so the board shouldn't be changing it, I'd be interested, perhaps at our next meeting, if it's not like a massive research project, I'm sure some of you can just respond right now. Doesn't the board somewhat regularly change, or at least periodically change, non-material aspects of the ordinance, particularly related to administrative cleanup and things of that nature? And I think we should consider as part of our strategy going forward, for those who actually objected, and maybe legitimately as opposed to a talking point, objected to changing the ordinance because the taxpayers passed it, I think we just need to help them understand that first and foremost, it's certainly not unprecedented that the board changes the ordinance in non-material ways, certainly. And that secondly, really I think three of the four proposed changes clearly were administrative oriented to actually assist the board in doing its job in relation to selection of, to make it easier for the board to do their job. The fourth one about, adding the two members, I can understand that there might be philosophical differences, right? There's this whole, car versus transit. And in fact, if somebody had objected to adding a transit member, I actually would have understood that, but nobody even went there. Nobody even raised that. So I share Sunny's sentiments. It's truly unfortunate that it went the way it did, but I do think it might be helpful if there are people who legitimately view that the board should not be changing the ordinance, if there's some way to provide a review of board action in that regard, just to sort of help clarify that we're not suggesting something that's unprecedented. Certainly the board should know it's within their power, and that they should be aware that these kinds of cleanups and administrative fixes happen, as needed and somewhat regularly. So thank you.
Yes, Sunny?
I just want to build on that. We actually went through all that process with an independent counsel to make sure that we were within the limits of making those changes. And it was understood and agreed, even with Sandak Council, that yes, this is fine, we move forward. And so, but I don't think that was the problem. No one even really got into that. We didn't even respond to any of those concerns. There was no, I didn't hear any responses to those concerns. If that was the concern, I just can't understand, what it was that caused that. I don't think anyone read the information, unfortunately. It is a new board. I do agree that I think they need to understand what the role of ITALK is. So if you're having the retreat or the orientation, maybe, a session, and I have never attended that. Maybe we need to be there to discuss or show, what we do, or, provide some information, and I think part of the problem was this was a new board. We had discussed briefly this information with the previous chair, then, the new year, new chair, and we did not really have that opportunity to brief, some of the members or the chair that what was happening and what the reason was for that. So anyway, I'm interested in figuring out what we do to move forward. I still think what we provided, those changes we recommended, were warranted based on the new regional plan and the plans for improving the function of this body. So hopefully, we can come up with a good resolution and move forward. So, and we'll have maybe more time to educate the board members with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. Okay, I am going to move on to agenda item number 9 at this time, and that is the proposed fiscal year 24 ITALK annual operating budget, and we're going to go back to Zara.
Yes, hello again. As you know, per the TransNet extension ordinance, the ITALC members, the ITALC submits an annual operating budget to the Board of Directors each year for approval. The ordinance states that all costs for administering ITALC activities are to be paid from TransNet sales tax proceeds. The funds made available to ITALC are not to exceed $250,000 after an adjustment for inflation each year. For FY 2024, this equals approximately $504,000 as shown in attachment 1. The ITALC operating budget funds the administration of ITALC activities, including your fiscal and performance audits, development of your ITALC annual report, and legal consultant services expenses, for example. This year, the proposed ITALC operating budget is approximately $642,000, which is higher than the estimated allocation amount for FY 2024, primarily due to the requirement to conduct your triennial performance audit in the coming year. The shortfall is proposed to be covered by carryover balance from prior years, as is allowed per the ordinance, which would leave approximately $59,800 in the carryover balance remaining. The Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve the proposed Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee operating budget as part of the FY 2024 SANDAG program budget in substantially the same form as attached. And we are here to answer any question that you might have.
Thank you so much, Zara. Madam Clerk, any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, no public comments.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to committee members. Questions or comments on this item? Yes, Stuart.
I just had one question about the SANDAG salary benefit indirect allocation. It strikes me a little bit curious that the fiscal 2024 number is so much lower than prior years. But then when you add it to the fiscal 2023 and divide by 2, on average between the 2 years, it's consistent. I was just wondering, is there some weird timing thing so that it actually, we should look at it as the sum of those 2 years so that the average is fairly in line? Or is there something just different about 2024, the way you guys are going to be doing, or maybe this is Ariana's retirement. This is reflected in the number going down. It just jumped out at me. I was just a little bit curious. Thanks.
So the reason was to try to balance the budget and just keep that within the limits that is available.
Okay, okay, got it. Thanks. We appreciate your efforts to balance our budget. Thank you.
So Zara, in that regard, then staff, it's not that staff salaries or that that number is going down, but we're allocating from different pot of money to cover those expenses.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. Yes, Sunny.
I have a question on attachment 1 also, the carryover balance. Just trying to figure out how that's being calculated, like for 23 and 24. Even though we're dipping into the carryover, we still get a balance of 195 or the 173. So how is that calculated?
Thank you. That's a great question. We have Marcus Pascal.
Oh, you're ready.
Yes, he can answer that question.
Hello, members of the ITALC. So the carryover is actually an attachment in the quarterly TransNet. So I'm just going to refer to that right now. So, sorry, Sunny, can you repeat the question for me?
Marcus, which item in attachment?
It's attachment 4.
To item 6?
For item 5.
Item 5?
Yes.
Okay. So in the table, attachment 1, you have a carryover balance for 22 is 97,000. Then we add a net difference of, I'm assuming that's how it's calculated, 19,000 from 23, but now we have a 173 carryover. Then for 24, even though we dip into it to basically cover the cost for 24, we still have a carryover balance of 195. So how is it growing?
Yeah, I think the disconnect there is on Zara's attachment, that's the beginning carryover balance. So the difference in that year isn't going to be reflected until the next year, if that makes sense.
No. Say it again or explain.
Yeah, one more time.
So 97,000 is not the only carryover left? Is there a bigger budget before those years? Is that what it is?
No, the 97,000 is the only carryover, but that 97,000 it's the starting balance of the carryover that's reflecting on the attachment.
Okay.
So the difference in that column for that year, it's not going to be added until the next year.
Okay.
So you won't see it until the next year. It's not going to add up to that current year.
How do you come up with the 173? Maybe you can explain that to me.
So the 173, so I'm looking at my attachment. I can't reference Zara's attachment, but I see the 173 here, and that's from all the differences in the past.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
So beyond the 97,000 from 22, there are other carryovers from prior years that are not showing up?
That's correct.
So this is attachment 4 from item 5.
Okay.
So it has a little bit more detail.
Oh, okay. I'll refer to that then. Yeah. But yeah, because what this 197 is 23 budget. Okay, I'll have to look at that. What is it? Attachment 4?
It's attachment 4 to item 5.
Item 5. Okay, thank you. I'll take a look.
Thank you, Sunny. Other comments? Yes, Les.
Yeah, I'm following this conversation, and I was looking at this as well, and I guess I'd ask it a different way, just looking at the operating budget. And so going forward, if we have a report like this time that's going to put us beyond our budget, is it just common practice to take from the overage every time, or should we be looking at the budget and increasing that just in case there's not enough in sufficient funds?
So that's what I understand has been done previously. And the reason for the shortfall, again, is the triennial performance audit that the budget was about $320,000 for that.
Yeah, so the ordinance allows you to carry over any unused balance to future years, particularly to fund your performance audit, which is that high dollar amount every 3 years. And so in those years, when you have a performance audit, there may not be as much to cover the staff and the salaries, for example, but you'll see a higher dollar amount in that line item next year, for example, in FY25. Yeah.
Yes, Stuart.
Yeah, I appreciate Sunny diving into this. I think from my point of view, one thing to take away is that this particular attachment doesn't give the reader the ability to do the, A plus B minus C equals D sort of bottom line. And so we might want to think a little bit about, if I heard Marcus correctly, what's shown here in the carryover balances is the beginning of period, not end of period balances.
Correct, yes.
So that would help just to clarify the presentation a little bit. Thanks.
Other member comments on this? No. Okay, well, this is an action item, so I do need a motion.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion by Stuart, Mr. Halpern, and a second by Michael Kinney to approve the fiscal year 2024 ITALC operating budget. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. For real estate right-of-way acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Yes.
For licensed civil traffic engineer, Michael Kenny.
Yes.
For contractor construction, Vice Chair Orso Delgado.
Yes.
For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Yes.
For finance and budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Yes.
For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Yes.
And for CEO private sector, Sunny House.
Yes.
Thank you, and that item passes unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will move on to agenda item number 10, which is a request for a schedule extension amendment for a TransNet Smart Growth Incentive Program. And Tracy Fershaw will be presenting this item. Good morning, Tracy.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Yeah, I will be presenting as well as a representative from the City of San Diego, Everett Hauser. So in October of 2018, City of San Diego received a $2.5 million Smart Growth Incentive Program grant award for the downtown Cycleway Improvements Phases 1 and 2 project. The project improves bicycle infrastructure in the downtown San Diego area. The project scope includes street resurfacing, traffic striping, and construction of 2.67 miles of Class 4 cycle track with curb ramps, raised medians, and angled parking and signal modification for cyclists. The project constructs a downtown cycle network, creating a protected bicycle facilities, including cycle tracks and multi-use paths, providing physical separation between vehicle, traffic, and cyclists. So before you here, we have a map of the network. And as you can see, this project is constructed of multiple phases. The grant-funded portion of the project includes the areas shown in blue and in yellow. We are here today to talk about the project work began in October 2018, and the grant agreement expired in October 25 of 2021. The project completed all major construction, and the city opened the project for public use. So we are here today. I'm going to draw your attention to the portion in yellow, and I don't have my, oh, thank you so much. I love our production team. So I'm going to draw your attention to the portion of J Street, which is the portion where you see the red star. Goes along the Petco Stadium. So I encourage you to take a look at this project. It's a great project. If you want to catch a game, I really invite you to take your bike down there. It's a beautiful project. Unfortunately, the last segment of the project, which is where the star is, it's one block. So the project scope on J Street is all the way from 1st to 17th Street. So there's one block missing, which is a block of 16 to 17th Street. And this is where it's indicated by the red star. The missing block will connect the project to a future Sandag Imperial Avenue Bikeway project. The Imperial Bikeway project will provide one-way Class 2 buffered bike lanes on each side of the road. The Imperial Avenue it will start from 47th Street all the way to the east and connect up to the 17th Street. At your meeting in January, I believe Chris Kluth presented on the Regional Bikeway Program status update, and the Imperial Bikeway was mentioned, as well as the connection to the bikeways in the City of San Diego's Downtown Mobility Plan were presented in one of the attachments as a high priority urban bikeway. Final design for the last block of J Street was not determined at the time the major construction was concluded. Since then, the city has been working with the Sandag Active Transportation Team group discussing design options, which will ensure seamless connectivity of the multi-directional side-by-side double-track cycleway and the connection to the one direction on each side of the bike facilities that the Imperial Bikeway will provide. So in order to complete the project, the city has requested a 36-month schedule extension, And so it's a 3-year schedule extension, but we're looking to open the full extent of the J Street, the completion of the block by November of 2024. The reason why we're asking for a 36 is because it needs to be retroactive to the termination of the grant agreement to make the grant agreement whole. So attachment 2 provides detailed information regarding the schedule extension and the city's proposed solution to maximize safety and utility for the users, transitioning to both, to the 2 bikeway projects. So I will, at this point, transition it over to the city's project manager, Everett Hauser, to go into a little more detail of the last block design and construction timeline.
Great, thank you, Tracy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Everett Hauser, Program Manager with the city's Transportation Department. We can go to the next slide. So we want to again thank Sandag for the grant to implement portions of the downtown mobility. It's a 9-mile total network, and this construction project completed 2-way cycle tracks on C Street, the conversion of the 1-ways on B Street, as well as the extension of J Street. So here's just a few more images of the completion of the project. So we thank Sandag for those funds to make that possible. Next slide. Here's an overview of all the work that was done with that phase of the project. Again, it's been broken up multiple times to trying to find the alignment for the right number of phases and how those could be bundled. So this was the scope of the work. And next slide will highlight again that last block where we were coordinating with Sandag's Imperial Bikeway to make that connection from the 2-way cycle track, which you see on the left, to when the next slide will be Sandag's 1-way bike lanes on each side of the road. And so my last slide is a little bit of that timeline that Tracy was describing about how we were coordinating with Sandag to connect those two. Once you come to an intersection, you have to get the operations right. And so we were having those discussions with Sandag staff. There's again the timeline, and we're here today at ITALK, and Imperial Bikeway is described to be opening bid in spring of 23. And we'll propose to close that gap. And then by the time the Imperial Bikeway is open, there'll be a seamless transition between the 2 bikeways. So thank you for your time, and available for any questions about the proposal.
So today, the ITALK is asked to recommend a 36-month schedule extension for the City of San Diego's Downtown Mobility Cycleway Improvements Project, Phase 1 and 2 Smart Growth Incentive Program Project, to the Regional Planning Committee.
Thank you so much, Tracy and Mr. Hauser, for being here. We appreciate your time. I know you're very busy. Madam Chair, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, we do not.
Thank you. Okay, I'll bring it back to committee members then. Questions or comments for either Tracy or Mr. Hauser? Les, yes?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Thanks for the presentation. And I just wanted to ask if you could clarify, was this segment included in the original grant? So there's no additional funding required, right? Just an extension of the grant?
Yes, there will be no additional funding awarded from Sandag. However, any additional costs will be the city's match.
And Tracy, or maybe for Everett, I imagine this segment, this last block, was included in the initial design, and it was just omitted. I'm a little confused as to how, if it was designed, assuming that it was, the original scope of the grant was intended to be this entire length. It was designed and then not implemented, or how did this last block get missed?
Right, so, okay, I'm still on. So as you saw in the overall map, the downtown mobility and the application for the smart growth grant included basically the entire network, and then we bundled the package for construction. And then when Sandag's project to the east was contemplated, and so, again, that last block, there's a decision to make between how you connect the 2-way cycle track to one-way bike lanes across the street. And so we were having discussions, you do signalization, bring it back to the other side. And so that's why that last block was up in the air about how to connect these 2 bikeways, which wasn't contemplated during the original application.
Thank you. Michael?
How do you do it?
We're going to go one-way cycle tracks on the last block, and they'll join the two-way at 16th at the all-way stop.
And can you help me with the schedule again? The point in which we're matching for the 30s, is that sometime in the past? So you have a complete timeline, or you mentioned that the 36 months request was so you had a continuous grant timeline?
Yes, the 36 months will be retroactive to the to 2021 when the grant expired in October. So basically, it will just be a little bit over a year. November 2024 is when it will be scheduled to be open to the public.
Well, it's important that they connect. I'm glad to hear it's only a year out.
Yes, Sunny.
So I need a little bit more clarification. First of all, on the big map, you highlighted the yellow and the blue. The green, how much of that is from TransNet, also from the early bike action program?
So we funded phases 1 and 2, which were the blue and the yellow. The green was all funded through, I guess, their general funds, or if you got another.
Yeah, we use a mix of downtown parking district and other grant sources.
So TransNet only did the 2 phases.
Okay. Is the design complete now, or is it still being reviewed?
For the last block?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some more fine details to work out, but generally, I mean, it's just the block, so we know how we're going to connect it.
And what's the timing of the construction on the east side, the Sandak project? What's the timing on that? Is that constructed?
So that was on my last slide. So again, they're going out to bid.
Could you come back to that last slide?
This spring, and then they'll have 20 to 22 months, so they should be open early 2025.
Okay, so the Imperial Bikeway, that's the Sandak project?
Correct.
That will open 2025, and yours is going to be completed when?
We hope to do it this year, this calendar year.
Construction will be
yes.
completed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Pedro.
A long time ago, a bridge engineer told me that when he was building his bridge, that I would have to meet the roadway. I said, well, but you have a bust of 2 tents. He says, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, can you fix the bridge? He says, no. So just meet the road. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that, and I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding, at some point in time, you had a design for this project. Don't know at what point in time that you became aware that the Imperial bike was coming online and that there was a connection, possible conflict. And now we're having to go retroactive 3 years to make sure that you don't lose the money for this one block. And I don't know if the communication should have happened 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So to avoid this conflict, or to tell either Sandak, this is what we're doing, you need to match it, instead of, having this liquid portion here of what's going to happen. But I don't understand the timing of that, and I don't know if you can explain that, Everett.
Well, if we pull up my slide again with the timeline, I think that was trying to communicate the sequence of events. So I'm not following your question about, certainly when there was a time when the application was made, when downtown mobility was mapped out, the scope of what was put in the application, again, it wasn't anticipated the Imperial Bikeway, but once that was known that we were going to connect, then the 2 agencies started working together about making those best connections. As you're all aware, once Sandak constructs regional bikeways, they do become city assets. So, we are very interested in how those connections are made and what materials and design solutions are found for these Sandak bikeways. So, we work very closely together to ensure that whatever we build is going to work seamlessly with whatever Sandag builds.
Is the initial design of that last block very different to what you're doing today because of the Imperial bike connection?
Right. So if you would imagine, J Street is two-way, and you could have taken J Street all the way up until the end and terminate it as a two-way cycle track, but then that's the end of the bikeway. Where does everyone go from there? Who knows? That's kind of the end of that planning effort. And then east on J past 17th, there was no bikeway contemplated. So then again, where do people go? How do they transition out of that two-way cycle track? You know, you have design decisions there. But then once Sandag had Imperial Bikeway, we had to make that connection again and figure out what the solution was going to be.
So your original design just ended the bike there. And now you're adding this transition.
Right, we're connecting the two bikeways.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, Sunny?
I guess, looking at this, why did it take you so long to come here? June 2019 is you signed the plans. You started discussions on July 2020. Here we are, 2023. So you knew this wasn't going to happen. So what happened in between then and now, and why wasn't this brought forward sooner?
Right, and so that's just on us in terms of coordination with all elements. Summer of 2020, giant pandemic kind of really messed up communications and efforts for everything. So had a lot going on, and just again, we were in discussion. So I think in our mind, we were going to figure out the solution about connecting these two bikeways, but then had missed the communication back to this grant staff about, yes, this block is an element described in the scope.
Are there other projects like this that might be delayed? Is there anything else that, has fallen through the cracks because of the pandemic?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, not that I'm aware of.
The city.
But we do have practices put in place. So we do have what we call site visits or audit walks, either before construction, during construction, and after construction. That really, I guess, solidifies the scope and schedule of the project and verifies the adherence of the scope. However, again, like I said, this project was completed during the pandemic in 2021 when most people were working from home. So the site visits didn't become that much of an issue then. Since then, like I said, we also, as a performance measure on our capital grants, both in active transportation and smart growth, we do walk audits, and we do what we call baseline data collection, which is bicycle counts and vehicular counts before and after a project. So what happened was the active transportation group, like I said, they're going out to bid now for construction for their bikeway, their Imperial Bikeway. They actually went to the corner where it connects, and there was no facilities there to count why, so that's how it came to our attention.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
It's unlikely that the city of La Mesa and the city of El Cajon would build a roadway right up to each other's border that didn't match. How is it that Sandag was provided an approved plan set from the city in 2019, and they couldn't accommodate the project when they were going into design? Why did your design move forward when the city's was already completed? Why was there no effort to construct a cycle track instead of bike lanes at that point?
Are you saying for the city or for Sandag?
It would appear as though the from that timeline that the Imperial Bikeway lags the city's project, that the city had already had an approved project back in 2019. Am I understanding that correct?
Right. So yeah, so Sandag's Imperial Bikeway was still in design when we're in construction.
I mean, the important thing is to make sure they match now, but that seems to be the opportunity that was missed. When an approved project was made available to a project that was in design, that approved project should have been accommodated. And now we're trying to do a one block match between a cycle track and 2 bike lanes. That just seems odd. So that's why you're catching these questions. Why didn't the project become a cycle track or bike lanes? Why does one direction provide you bike lanes on 2 sides of the street and another project provide you a cycle track on the other side of the street? Yeah, I mean, that's
right. And I think that's part of the issue about how we were connecting the 2 bikeways is what are those design questions, how Imperial was designed, what are the ramifications of their design on street parking, street layout.
So I can only assume that the grant process was restrictive enough that by the time the Imperial project went into design, it couldn't change to match the project from the city that was already approved. Is that true?
I think those are questions for the Imperial Bikeway team, though.
That's true. Is there anybody here who can answer that?
No, but I can get back to you on that. I can contact the active.
Yeah, so somewhere between June of 2019 and July of 2020, I imagine there was a discussion between Sendex staff and city staff. It's like, that's not what we're building, but how do we, I'd just be interested to know how that discussion went. Because it looked like there would have been time to change the Imperial Bikeway project to match.
Well, or yeah, so your questions are on Imperial, and from our end, we're connecting the last block. Eventually, it's going to be our facility. So yeah, that was part of how should we connect the 2.
Is there a project anywhere else that you know of that matches those 2 types of facilities in one block?
Yeah, I mean, bikeways transition from cycle tracks to bike lanes to share rows all the time, kind of in multitude of scenarios.
Any in San Diego County?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
cycle track to
bike lane to
so
shared.
At the end of 6th Avenue, you end your cycle track and it goes to 2 bike lanes? And it must end.
Yeah.
Does it end in a way that the next block has bike lanes on it?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay, well, I suppose if you do it regularly, then this shouldn't be something unusual.
Right.
So it's just a matter of adjusting the timeline to complete the work. Okay, thank you for that. Jonathan.
Yes,
Pedro.
Michael, I believe, and I'm not privy to all of the ins and outs, but I believe that there probably was some lack of communication between the city and the Sandag team. I also believe that possibly the city team could have change ordered out that last block and somehow figure out what a monetary cost would be and transfer that money to the Sandag team if they were communicating so that they could have finished up in time for their grant. And, I think there could have been a lot of things that could have been done had there been more open communication between the 2 teams. I don't think that happened, but I think we're here right now, and the issue at hand is, they need to finish this up. And how much money is that last block that we're talking about?
We don't have a cost estimate from it yet, but as Tracy mentioned, it's no further grant funding. So it'll just be city funds to complete it.
Okay. So
it's 2 signal mods, right?
So
2 signal mods and striping, essentially.
Yeah, I just want to clarify the timeline here. So Everett, in June of 2019, the plans were signed and those plans included this last block, correct?
No, they ended at 16th Street.
Okay, so those plans did not. So in the phase 1B and 2A, when that was completed, that was never intended to include this last block?
Correct. So that was a gap between our scope and then what the plans eventually contained in their entirety.
I see. And now to complete it, I imagine, would there have been an opportunity? I mean, so I guess in what month did if you know, did the phase 1B, 2A work complete? I know it was in 21, but do you know approximately when?
I believe late summerish, because again, our ultimate grant time period ended in October.
So that would mean that when the time between when the discussion first occurred, July 2020, there was approximately a year. That was approximately a year prior to the completion of the phase 1B and 2A work.
Yeah, right.
And so would there have been an opportunity to implement a construction change during that period of time? I just would imagine that. And I understand it's not TransNet funding, but obviously when you have crews out and they're mobilized and you're doing work, I'm sure there's significant additional expense for the city to remobilize 2.5 years later, or year and a half later. Obviously not relevant to TransNet necessarily, but would there have been an opportunity in your mind, had communication gone on, to include this last segment during that July 2020 to approximately late summer of 21 period?
Yeah, so I'm following along in your logic, and certainly there would have been. I think where we were was still in discussions with Sandag about what would be the best way to connect the two, knowing that eventually it's going to be our facility. You know, oftentimes we pick up gaps. We're constantly improving other segments and facilities to be their best. So it was always going to be a matter of our assets to be improved upon. But I'm following your timeline, and yes, that could have occurred.
Okay, thank you. Sunny?
Just a little bit of clarification. So we are, of course, not voting on approving or not. We're just recommending today. But if you're asking us to recommend extension of the $2.5 million grant, is that correct, Tracy?
Yes, that's correct. You're asked to recommend the extension of the grant, which was a $2.5 million grant, which has not been fully given to the city yet. We still have the retention, and so retention is released upon notice of completion. So we still have that. However, like I said, we're not awarding any more than the 2.5.
Okay. And the 2.5 million, part of it has already been spent because of the rest of the project. It's just this gap.
Correct.
Correct.
Because
it's not
between
done,
the first two phases, I believe, 86, did you say 86 blocks? It's about 86 blocks. Yeah, so yeah, it's only one block that has not been constructed. So we have been paying the construction for that.
And again, it's not up to us to approve. If the board, let's say, they don't approve because of the delays and lack of communication, whatever the reason, what would happen then? Does the city have to go back and reapply for another grant, or they have to come up with different funding? What are the consequences?
They would have to complete the block with and not get their retention.
Through other, okay, so the
retention would go back into the next call for projects.
Okay, and how much is the retention amount?
It's 10%, so it roughly, what, 2,500?
So you've already paid the rest of the 2.5 million. It's just the retention amount, what, 10%, so 250,000. That's really what we're talking about?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That makes it a little bit more clear. Okay, thank you.
Michael, quickly.
One last question, and I'll make a motion. Is there anything at 17th Street that would necessitate a change from the cycle track to bike lanes? Is there a volume change, or does the freeway cause some kind of change in the roadway that the cycle track has no value beyond east of 17th Street?
Not in particularly. I mean, the 17th is signalized. There is a freeway ramp to the south. It tends into more residential further east of 17th.
Well, these
across the
jobs are
bridge.
difficult, and the last block is often the most challenging component of it, and it is important that it gets designed to complement both projects. So I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the Transportation Commission and the board to approve the the item as written.
I'll second that.
Thanks very much. So we have a motion by Mr. Kenny and a second by Mr. Hopper to recommend approval of the 36-month extension request. Stuart, any further comments?
Just very quickly, if I could, and I appreciate we spent a lot of time on this. First, I think we all have tremendous sympathy for the complexity of doing these types of projects, working with different jurisdictions, et cetera. I would hope that in part of this, if there were any lessons to be learned from a project management standpoint, that everybody do a little bit of a postmortem to think about that. It's no surprise to anybody who's following this that there's been a certain degree of disappointment by the public and various people on the length of getting these bikeway projects done. So again, I would just hope that you all will do a little postmortem and try to think through, are there project management procedures, checklists, whatever it might be, that will help going forward. The final thing I'd say, and I don't know who writes these memos, but somebody asked a really good question here. Aside from this body, what happens if the board votes no? I think it'd actually be great to have right up in the little gray box, we say, if approved, here's what would happen. But if not approved, here's what would happen, or at least highlight to people, the difficulty, awkwardness, the disappointment, whatever it might be as the result of not approving. It'd be helpful to make sure people are aware of that so they're voting in a fully informed manner. Anyway, thank you, but we've got a motion and a second. I'll vote yes when the roll comes.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. For real estate right-of-way acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Yes.
For licensed civil traffic engineer, Michael Kenny.
Yes.
For contractor construction, Vice Chair Ursa Delgado.
Yes.
For biology environmental, Dustin Fuller.
Yes.
For finance budgeting, Stuart Halpern.
Yes.
For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Yes.
For CEO private sector, Sunny House.
Yes.
Thank you, and that item passes unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Hauser, for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Jonathan, if you may indulge me, I know that we voted, it passed and all of that, but somehow I believe Sandak should have some sort of a quality assurance plan where we look at connection points and we make sure that the dialogues are happening so that we don't get into the situation again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you so much, Tracy,
Very good
for your presentation. Okay, we will move on to item number 11, and this is the ITALK annual report, and Michael Turlep will be presenting this item. Michael.
Good morning, everybody. So per the TransNet ordinance, one of the ITALK's responsibilities is to prepare an annual report for the board of directors and the public, including the results of the annual fiscal and compliance audits and the triennial performance audits. While the ITALK has previously chosen to establish a subcommittee for the development of the ITALK annual report, most recently the ITALK provided direction that a subcommittee would not be necessary this year. Consistent with that direction, today what we are asking from the committee is to provide any preliminary input on what they would like to see included or changed in the upcoming annual report. And to do this, I would like to go over last year's annual report section by section. So as in previous years, the federal year 2023 annual report is proposed to include a letter from the ITALK chair. The next section would cover any new goals the ITALK has established for itself going into 2023. And the section after that would track progress on recommendations from the 2021 and 2018 triennial performance audits. And the next section is proposed to provide results from your fiscal and compliance audits. And the next section after that would provide TransNet funding highlights showing where TransNet funds are being used. And the next section is proposed to highlight high-profile TransNet priority projects, along with showing progress in key TransNet program areas. Lastly, a section on how readers may get involved, access ITALK meetings, ask questions, and more is proposed to be included. So if there are any changes or if there's any specific content the committee would like to see, staff will gladly begin to incorporate that into your annual report. And then we can bring a draft to an upcoming meeting for further review and discussion. Thank you. That concludes our presentation, and we're open to any questions you guys may have.
Thank you so much, Michael. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, we do not have any public comments.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to committee members. Comments, questions on the annual report. Sunny, yes.
I was just wondering, we had a section on goals and accomplishments and progress. Are we keeping that as well? I mean, I don't see a lot of discussion of goals this year, so how is that going to be addressed?
So we'll have a section. Are you talking about your goals that you guys established back
For
in
this
October?
year, are there goals established? And we're not getting really progress. I don't know if it goes into the consent item. The activity is different, so I'm just wondering, is that relevant still to keep or not?
Yeah, so that section is going to be kept into the annual report and just be updated based on the goals that were set and the updates on the status of implementation of the goals.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Yes, Les.
Yeah, I'll just quickly comment that there were a few of us on that subcommittee last time around, and I was really pleased with the format of the report. We worked on that, and I liked how that came out. So I think if you keep something similar, just with updates, as Sunny had mentioned, that'd be a good way to go, and then we can get into details on what those would be.
Thank you, Les. Michael, I did have one comment, which is the section of the report related to progress on our triennial performance audits, the 2021 and 2018. The last annual report, there is a section with relative to AB 805, but there wasn't any discussion included at that time. And I do think that it would be appropriate to explore some sort of the opportunity to include an analysis, a discussion of the impact of AB 805. I don't know how, we would establish some sort of objective metric to determine the impact that the bill has had. Maybe, number of times the weighted vote was called, how it's been used, whether items, have failed or succeeded based on the utilization of the weighted vote. But given the intense public discussion around it, I think it'd be appropriate to include in the annual report.
Just to add, I think there was an analysis done last year. I think this analysis for this year would be very different. So it would be good to get an update on that.
So yeah, so your FY21 triennial performance audit included an analysis of AB 805 and any unintended consequences, or I believe that was the scope. And the audit did determine that there were no adverse impacts. So if that is something that you would like staff to spend time on, or if that is something perhaps that you're, you are going to be establishing a subcommittee for your next audit, your FY24 audit, performance audit at this meeting or next meeting?
March.
In March. And that subcommittee will be working on the scope for your next audit. So that could be another opportunity to take a look at that as well.
Yeah, understood. I guess I wasn't familiar enough with the audit recommendations when I made the comment. I apologize. But okay, well, I'll give some additional thought to perhaps how it could be included. And again, we'll have a subcommittee on the scope of the next performance audit. And so perhaps there's a note that this is a topic of discussion in the future, but understood it wouldn't be appropriate to include it in the progress report as there were no recommendations related to that item.
Yeah, one other thing I'll mention that maybe we should have mentioned also, in prior annual reports, you have taken the opportunity to incorporate this, just a high-level overview of the scope that you anticipate your upcoming performance audit to include. So not only looking back at the implementation progress of the prior audits, but also maybe highlighting what the scope will include. And if that's something you would like for us to incorporate, we can do that as well.
That's helpful. Thank you, Ariana.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion on the annual report? Okay, well, this is a discussion item only, so seeing none, we'll move on to item number 12, which is our fiscal year 24 to 28 TransNet program and transit-related revenues. We have Zara and Marcia will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Chair Frankel. This item is the short revenue forecast that is brought to the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, Transportation Committee, and Board of Directors every year in February. These estimates allow SANDAG and our partner agencies to plan for capital projects and to determine operating subsidies for FY 2024 through FY 2028. The attachment to your report provides the estimates for the overall TransNet program and includes a breakdown of major corridors, new bus rapid transit, and rail operations, transit system improvements, and local street improvements sub-programs. The assumptions for the forecast were reviewed in a peer review process meeting, including external experts and the panel concluded that the methodology is valid and the forecast is reasonable. In addition, the current forecast went through our QA/QC process. Marsha Smith, Sandag's Associate Economic Research Analyst, is here to answer specific questions regarding the forecasting process and methodology. For FY 2024, the growth is forecast at 1% over anticipated revenues for FY 2023. The forecast is intended to be conservative, given economic uncertainty and desire to exercise caution and with revenue projections. The estimates are scheduled to be reviewed by the Transportation Committee at its February 17th meeting for recommendation to the Board of Directors at its meeting on February 24th. Upon board approval, the estimates will be released to transit and local agencies for planning and programming use. That concludes the report, and Marsha and I are here to answer any question that you might have.
Thank you so much, Zara. Madam Clerk, any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, no public comments on this item.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to committee members. Questions relative to the forecast? Sunny?
There was a statement in here that this was presented in February 8th meeting and no significant comments were provided twice. So unless you have a crystal ball, this is the iTalk meeting, so.
It sounds like because we prepare for the next,
I
the
understand.
Transportation Committee meeting.
I understand.
Apologies. Yes.
No problem.
Usually we add that one after this meeting, depending on how the discussion goes.
But my question is more just really fundamentally with Sandag and TransNet being where it is now, what's the capacity moving forward? This is going to, we have another few years on TransNet, and we're only relying on the sales tax. A lot of this was delivered earlier. We have the debt service cost and things like that. What is going to be the strategy besides another sales tax measure? How are we making sure that we can, Sandag can still deliver the programs, and I know you're doing a lot of maneuvering, trying to make sure you find the right funding. If we lose our capacity to attract federal and state funds, what's the scenario then? How are you preparing for that possibility? Andre is going to.
Okay.
Shall I take a first shot and then you can carry on?
I'm sure you'll do a much better job than I will.
No. So, like I mentioned earlier, we started with transit, it was about $100 million. We're up to 400 and something million. So on average, though, we were collecting approximately 3%. The growth was 3% over that time period, but we had an unprecedented growth over the COVID, where we're up 10% one year, followed by 22.5% the following, and this year we're up 8%. We had only forecasted 5%. So one of the things that we've been doing with Susan and our PFM, who are our financial advisors, we're updating our plan of finance. And one of the things that we've seen is initially, the last time we went to the bond market, we had a capacity of approximately 300 million in additional debt that we could issue. But based on the additional revenues, it looks like it's more like 800 million. So we can't get too excited about that because obviously that's on the revenue side. We've also seen costs go up quite a bit. So what we're doing in the plan of finance, we're updating both sides. We know what the revenues are, we know what our projections are, but we're working close with the PMs on potentially what the increases are on the expenditure side. So I think that the plan of finance will be coming to you later this year. So I think we'll be better prepared to answer some of your specific questions as far as what potential programs we can include and what we may need to exclude. But one of the things that you mentioned is we're always trying to leave some dry powder just in case we need to get some additional state and federal fundings that we can have, the additional capacity. If you recall, 3 years ago, we issued or we prepared ourselves for $100 million line of credit That was before the pandemic when things were getting a little bit tight, so we could have some dry powder capacity if, there was needs for federal and state augmentation, but obviously we haven't touched that because sales tax has gone up tremendously. So again, that's something that we're looking at pretty closely, and we'll be, looking forward to showing the plan of finance later this year. I'll answer some more questions that you probably have at that point.
Other questions, Stuart?
Yeah, excuse me, just one follow-up on that, and thank you for the explanation, Andre. I'm just curious, though, when you talk about the incremental bonding capacity, since we know that the bonds are relying on revenues that are going out in the future, right, across the life of the bonds, and you've mentioned that the past few years we've seen unusually high growth in revenue. Are you saying that the forecast won't assume sort of like what people call a reversion to the mean, that the revenues are likely to stay at those higher rates, which would therefore create the additional bonding capacity? Or is there some thought that, well, you know what, we can't count on those revenues staying at those higher rates, so we really need to be quite cautious in how dependent our plans are on those? Does the question make sense to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I struggle with that myself because just 3 years ago, TransNet was at a base of 300 million. 3 years later, we're at 400 million. But I think we've all seen inflation, the way it ramped up so much. So unfortunately, I think maybe Marcia can elaborate more on this, but generally, unless we have deflation, which none of us want, that's terrible for the economy. But generally, the prices will stay up. So what we're collecting today, our new base is 400 million. So I think, again, we don't do these forecasts in a vacuum, right? We have several outside agencies that we work with, including Moody Services or Avenue, that the projections that we have are very similar to what they have, as well as the other three independent sources, Marcia. So I don't know if you'd like to add to that, but generally, I think we see that the numbers are here to stay.
Yes, good morning, ITALK committee and Chair Frankel. Thanks. I would like to add a little bit of more context to it. We do look at 3 other forecasts: Moody's Analytics, IHS Market, and Oxford Economics. We look to them to predict future retail sales, which is a good proxy for how much sales tax we collect. There's a lot of trends that we see now, a lot of economic uncertainty ahead. Most of these forecasts are conservative, so we are grabbing onto a lot of their downturns that we expect. And as a result, we only forecasted a 1% increase for next year. Usually we're at a 2% federal funds rate, and normally a 2% increase. So we're looking at a little bit less than that.
Just one question or comment. I think it would be helpful to, and this is probably not the document to do it, but to understand our forecast, both actuals and then the forecast relative to what we assumed in the extension ordinance, itself overall. So kind of how we're doing. Maybe that's in the plan of finance or somewhere else. But I think, for members of the public, there has been lots of discussion about, will we have enough to deliver the projects that were included in major corridors and others? And so, wherever that lives, I think, thinking about here's our actual and then here's our forecasted, and if these forecasts were accurate, this is where we'd be relative to the overall revenues that we assumed in 2004 when the ordinance was extended.
I do have one more question, Jonathan. In attachment 3C, you have kind of a breakdown of what's available for program allocation after off the top costs come out. So it shows that in 2024 fiscal year, 412 million basically will be available. I don't know if you can put that up, or do you have that information? Attachment 3C. My question is the 412 million for major corridors and new BRT, transit system, local system improvements. Does that include also paying back the debt service cost? How does that work? Where does that show up, or where do you pay that from?
Yeah, this is before the debt services.
Okay, so the 412 includes payment of debt, repayment of debt as well. So really, we have less money available for actual implementation allocation. Can that be clarified in here, so we know how much money do we really have to put towards projects versus debt? I think it's a little bit skewed if we don't really have that information, so. Could that be? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's helpful, Sunny. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, this is just information items. So thank you so much, Zara and Marcia. Thank you so much for your participation. And we'll go ahead and move on to item number, sorry, I lost my place here, 13, which is a specialized transportation grant program, cycle 12, call for projects. And we're going to hear from Zachary Rivera. Hi, Zachary.
Hello, good morning, Chair and members of the ITALC. You can pull up the PowerPoint, please. Perfect. Wonderful. So again, thanks for the introduction. My name is Zach Rivera, and I serve as one of the program managers of the Specialized Transportation Grant Program, or SDGP. I'm here today to discuss the senior mini grant funding recommendations of the SDGP Cycle 12 call for projects. So, but first, a little background on the SDGP. The SDGP is composed of the Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 program, as well as the TransNet Senior Mini Grant Program. Taken together, the SDGP seeks to improve mobility for older adults and individuals with disabilities. This is done by delivering effective, equitable, environmentally responsible, and coordinated transportation solutions that use public funds wisely to address existing gaps in specialized transportation service. So about every 2 years, SANDAG holds a competitive process, also known as a call for projects, to distribute available Section 5310 and senior mini grant funding for projects that further the SDGP goal and objectives. The projects are scored based on eligibility and evaluation criteria set by the board with input from the ITALC, Transportation Committee, and Specialized Transportation stakeholders. So we're nearing the end of the Cycle 12 call for projects. Before I discuss the results pertaining to the Senior Mini Grant Program, here's a summary of key activities that led to this point. So we began the competitive process around this time last year by soliciting input from specialized transportation stakeholders. Staff held a specialized transportation workshop, released a survey, presented to the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, or STAC, as well as the Social Equity Working Group and other external stakeholder groups in the region. Based on this input, best practice research, and prior audits, staff came to this committee in early June 2022 with recommended Cycle 12 evaluation criteria. Staff then presented the evaluation criteria to the Transportation Committee and Board of Directors. Following board approval, staff released the call for projects in July 2022. Once the call closed on October 5th, 2022, staff reviewed 12 project proposals from 10 nonprofit organizations and local agencies that collectively requested about $4.4 million in SMG senior mini grant funding. Through this review, staff determined that one submitted project was non-responsive and ineligible based on the eligibility requirements set forth in the call. The remaining 11 projects were sent to evaluators external to SANDAG to review and score. Staff then developed project rankings and funding recommendations, conducted a social equity analysis of those funding recommendations, and completed a quality assurance review to mitigate any potential errors in the calculations. So the senior mini grant funding recommendations of the SDGP Cycle 12 call for projects are shown in attachment 1 of the staff report, which I believe as for a page reference is page 86. As a result of the process, 4 projects are collectively recommended to receive approximately $2.75 million in available senior mini grant funding to support specialized transportation services for older adults. Descriptions of the recommended projects are included as attachment 4, which is page 87. All 4 projects are continuation projects from the prior competitive process 2 years ago. As you see in attachment 2, funding would support volunteer driver program, information and referral services, as well as senior shuttles. The recommended projects also advance the SDGP goal and objectives, align with the priorities identified in the coordinated plan, and the coordinated plan is a subset of the 2021 regional plan, and show broad geographic coverage as shown on the map. As mentioned earlier, and as shown in attachment 3, the social equity analysis was conducted of the funding recommendations. The analysis found that the funding recommendations for both the federal Section 5310 and the local senior mini grant programs would cause neither potential disparate impacts for people of color nor disproportionate burdens for low-income populations. So in terms of next steps, so this funding recommendations will be brought to the Transportation Committee on February 17th. And the board is slated to consider approval at its meeting on February 24th. Pending board approval, the projects would be programmed in the RTIP in spring. In late spring, staff would hold a successful applicant webinar and prepare grant agreements for execution. And Cycle 12 senior mini grant projects would start on a rolling basis as earlier cycles, Cycle 11 senior mini grant projects are completed, and the Cycle 12 project would start no sooner than July 1st, but could start, as I said, on a rolling basis as other projects close out. So to recap, the ITALK today is asked to review and discuss the proposed senior mini grant projects recommended for funding to ensure consistency with the TransNet ordinance. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and open and welcome any of your comments at this time.
Thank you so much, Zachary. Appreciate the presentation. Madam Clerk, any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, no public comments.
Thank you. We will bring it back to committee members for questions or comments for Zachary. Sunny?
Okay, so Zachary, I just want to, first of all, one clarification. At one place in the memo, it says 2.57 million was provided in funding available. Did that number change, or is it just transposed? Because later it says 2.75 instead of 2.57. What's the amount, actual amount?
It's the higher amount.
The higher amount.
Yeah, so originally it was 2.57. That was when the call was released.
Okay.
And
so
now
you
we've
have-
had higher estimates based on the updated projections.
The more the better.
Yep.
Okay, good. So when I look at the list and I see the higher dollar numbers of the grant that was issued, there's basically about six or seven that did not get the grant, but they're smaller amounts. Was there ever a consideration maybe just splitting this money and having a smaller or some set aside for the smaller grants applications so that more people get the money versus, 1.2 to Jewish Center or something like that?
Yeah, so that's something we didn't do for this call for projects, but definitely going forward, given these results, we're looking into having a large cap and a small cap based on the disparate funding requests.
That would be great. The other thing is I see most of the ones that are received that it says, elder help of San Diego. I don't see a lot of geographic diversity in here, so I don't know what the area of coverage is for them, but it just seems like as far as equity, and coverage, there's not a lot of diversity in those.
So 2 of the projects recommended for senior mini grant funding are region-wide.
Okay.
2 of the others are more concentrated in the center of San Diego, but we also recognize that there is needs in a lot of the rural communities.
Yes.
And so we're always looking at ways to balance the needs of the region.
Okay, thank you.
Zachary, a couple of questions. The awardees, the recommendations, the 4 of them, are those organizations that have previously received grant funds?
Yeah, the 4 projects are continuations, so they've received funding in prior cycles.
Thank you. Yes, Les.
Yeah, thank you, Zachary. I'm kind of curious just on the table that you've provided that most of the applicants seem to be nonprofits, and I noticed there's only 1 local agency. Is that typical that we don't have more local agencies applying for funding for senior programs?
Yeah, so typically we have 1 or 2 local jurisdictions that apply. This time, not many applied, at least for the senior mini grant program. And during our outreach, when we notified the public of the availability of funds, we contacted all the local jurisdictions to make them aware of the funding. So.
Zachary, one follow-up is that in the last cycle, did we have the same 4 programs? I mean, was it the same?
Yeah, so we had the same 4 plus another grantee that is not recommended for funding this time.
I see. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, this was a discussion item, so thank you so much, Zachary. We will move on to item 14, which is a presentation by the City of San Diego regarding their capital improvement plan update. And these gentlemen have been extremely patient through 13 other items. So thank you so much for being here and for your patience. And we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, there's a number of us from the City of San Diego here for the presentation. Thank you, committee. I'm Gene Matter. I'm the Assistant Director for the City of San Diego's Transportation Department. With me, we have Julio Canisal, the department's Deputy Director of Finance. Also in the audience is Karen McGriff, the Assistant Director, and Louise Shar, Deputy Director from the city's Engineering and Capital Projects Department. And also from Transportation Department is Everett Hauser. We're here to provide the city's TransNet update and highlight how the funds are being utilized throughout the city. Julio is going to start off by providing an update on the fund balance, a look at the city's transportation portion of our CIP program, and how the city is leveraging this funding to provide transportation-related services. I'll then wrap up our presentation with information about some of the larger projects of interest. So now I'll turn it over to Julio.
Thank you, Ian, and good morning, committee members. I would like to start by saying that the City of San Diego receives approximately 42% of total TransNet revenue. With the implementation of cash management strategies, the city has made significant progress spending TransNet cash on priority projects over the last 6 fiscal years. The City of San Diego has one of the lowest cash balance as a percentage of annual revenue. This slide right here shows a snapshot of the current year's projection and their prior 6 fiscal years activity. Since fiscal year 2017, the city has slightly increased its fund balance at SANDAC by approximately $800,000. from 33.3 million in fiscal year 17 to a projected 34.1 million in fiscal year 23. And at the same time, expected TransNet revenue allocated to the city in fiscal year 23 has increased by approximately 15.8 million, from 31.9 million in fiscal year 17 to a projected 47.7 million in fiscal year 23. This means that today, compared to fiscal year 17, the city is more expeditiously spending its TransNet revenue allocation. We also project to end fiscal year 2023 with a fund balance of 34 million. This is a decrease of 5.1 million from fiscal year 2022. It is also important to note that this projected 34.1 million fund balance is programmed and earmarked for active city projects. The Transportation Department's Capital Improvements Program provides for the installation and improvement of various transportation infrastructure and systems. The department plans and programs right-of-way capital improvements projects, including resurfacing of streets, reconstruction of concrete streets and sidewalks, rehabilitation of bridges, construction of pedestrian, bicycles, and vehicular improvements, and upgrading obsolete streetlight circuits. The chart right here shows the different funding sources that support the department's fiscal year 2023 CIP program. TransNet is shown in the dark blue slice and makes up 63.5 million or 15% of the transportation CIP program. TransNet is it's an important funding source for the city and is often used to leverage other funds. Our street resurfacing program includes operations and maintenance and CIP. TransNet is used in conjunction with other funding sources like SB1, RMRA funding, gas tax funding, and debt financing, for example. In fiscal year 2022, the city invested nearly 100 million in street maintenance, and 14% was funded by TransNet revenue. We also often leverage TransNet as a match for federal and state grants. Some of the projects include the West Mission Bay Bridge, the Otay Truck Route Phase 4, Market Street, 47th Street to Euclid Complete Street, where we use approximately 6.2 million of TransNet revenue in fiscal year 22 as a match. Fiscal year 2022 TransNet expenditures were almost 34.8 million, 23.6 million for congestion relief activities, and 11.2 million for administration and maintenance activities. Overall, fiscal year 2022 CIP expenditures for the city were higher than fiscal year 21, but not higher than pre-pandemic level of fiscal year 2020. This slide right here shows the top 5 projects with the largest drawdowns in fiscal year 22. Traffic engineering project implementation expenditures expended 33.3 million, and this leads the list, followed by La Media Road, Otay Mesa Truck Route, as well as street resurfacing program, and lastly, new walkways. This slide right here shows TransNet expenditures through the first half of fiscal year 23 up to December 31, 2022. So CIP expenditures total 5.3 million and 15.6 million was encumbered in projects. The city is also on track to fully expend its maintenance, administration, and project implementation budgets by year end. These are our top 4 projects with the largest anticipated construction-related expenditures for fiscal year 23. We're estimating to expend about 6.7 million on street resurfacing, 2.3 million on traffic signals, 1.8 million on storm drains, and 1.5 million on Otay Mesa Truck Route. I will now turn it over to Jean.
Thank you, Julio. During my introductory, I forgot to recognize Patrick Ock. He's a program manager from the Transportation Department here as well. So as Julio reported earlier, the city invests nearly $100 million annually in street maintenance throughout the city. Over the last 6 fiscal years, the city has repaired over 1,500 miles, Resurfacing is an important function to improve a street's condition, which in turn provides safer traveling for vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. It also gives us an opportunity to reevaluate the roadway for any minor changes in its use. The street resurfacing program has a long-term goal of achieving and maintaining an average overall condition index of 70 or greater. The OCI is an assessment of the average material condition of city streets. A total of 235 miles of repairs were completed in fiscal year 2022, including approximately 202 miles of preventative maintenance through a slurry seal and 33 miles of an asphalt overlay. In fiscal year 23, the city is managing 17 projects that are scheduled to overlay a total of 63 miles. Of those 17 projects, 3 of them are paving-only projects, and the remainder are utility projects with paving associated with it. The city is also managing 6 projects that are scheduled to slurry seal a total of 168 miles, and in the process of advertising and awarding 2 more slurry seal projects that may yield additional miles. In total, we're projecting 231 miles of street repairs to be completed in fiscal year 23. Some of the challenges that may impact the schedule are related to typical construction issues such as inclement weather, material and labor issues, and unidentified conflicts. The city will continue to prioritize street repair based on periodic condition assessments, incorporating multimodal improvements with resurfacing efforts, and repairing streets in coordination with other capital projects. The city is also taking steps to prioritize street repair based on climate and equity factors. Our engineering capital projects department will continue proposing and planning and bundling asphalt overlay projects with other capital repair via our asset management program application, and the transportation department will review before confirming proposals and funding availability. As mentioned in the previous slide, over the last 6 fiscal years, the city has resurfaced over 1,500 miles of streets, and during that same period, the city has redesigned 436 miles of new or improved bike facilities as part of our Resurface Repurpose program. It's unfortunate that one of the previous topics talked about one block that was delayed due to coordination, but I wanted to thank Everett and his team for the 436 miles delivered. One example of our work on 30th Street was using TransNet funding, and the street was resurfaced and separated bikeways were installed. Another project to highlight relates to walkability. This project provides approximately 600 linear feet of sidewalk. It reconstructed 200 linear feet of roadway with a retaining wall. This project improved pedestrian access to transit stops on Woodman Street, promoted walking and public transit as alternate mode of transportation, and improves public safety for all modes of transportation by constructing a badly deteriorated roadway. Construction was completed in late calendar year 2022. Another multimodal project that I wanted to highlight was Market Street, Complete Streets. This project provides pedestrian and bicycle-focused infrastructure improvements and improves the existing roadways and replaces existing sidewalks to allow for new raised medians, cycle tracks, and additional on-street parking. The project also includes driveways, curb extensions, curb ramps, street lights, traffic signal mods, drainage improvements, street trees, bus paths, and street resurfacing. No wonder it's called a complete street. In addition, this project includes a water pipeline replacement on Euclid Avenue. Construction began in fiscal year 21 and was completed in this fiscal year. Also, I wanted to talk about the Otay truck route eastern phase, which provides for the construction of an additional lane to the existing Otay truck route between La Media and Drucker Lane. The Otay truck route western phase provides for the extension of the truck route, which is 2 lanes along Britannia Road from Britannia Court to the border and from Britannia Boulevard to La Media Road. Construction for the eastern phase began in fiscal year 20 and was substantially completed this fiscal year. Lastly, we all know the importance of drainage when it comes to transportation. And one of the projects I wanted to highlight was in October of 2021, a section of a 42-inch corrugated metal storm drain along Tuxedo Drive failed and caused a 4-foot by 4-foot depression in the roadway. An emergency project was initiated to replace the pipe. Work consisted of replacing 475 feet of the 42-inch pipe with concrete pipe. During construction, the pipe downstream was observed to be in poor condition, and an additional 270 feet of 42-inch pipe was actually lined with trenchless technology. Work also included resurfacing the road above and replacing the storm drain, along with 4 curb ramps and approximately 75 feet of sidewalk that had settled and cracked. Construction started in November 21 and was completed in December 2022. In closing, the city has implemented several process improvements to maximize efficient use of our CIP funding. This is extensive cross-section coordination between all stakeholder departments to evaluate when projects need funding. This has significantly reduced instances in which funding is underutilized in projects or projects are delayed for lack of funding. The city is currently developing an enterprise asset management system that will help implement and institutionalize a broader, more holistic approach to our public improvements. What this means is we are aligning all the needs of each asset type and planning projects based on the greatest benefit and risk reduction. For example, if the storm drain, water, and wastewater systems are approaching the end of their useful life and the street is in poor condition, that project will be a higher priority than another street with less total needs. The end result will be a well-planned strategic approach to asset management. Myself and the team are here to answer any questions, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Matter, for your presentation. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, we do not have any public comments.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to committee members for questions and comments for the city team.
My apologies, Chair. We do actually have one public comment.
Thank you, Francesca. Please go ahead.
Excuse me, Tim Bailish, if you're ready to go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate the committee's activities again. I wanted to make a question. I hope this is an appropriate place about the street resurfacing. I've seen it in many different areas of the county, and I presume Sandag's work is in a lot of it because it's really neat. And I think these improvements make a marked difference. And I would hope that that gets publicized a little more. The other part of this is that asphalt around this area seems to deteriorate very rapidly. And so attention is always paid to fixing the potholes and making some of these improvements. Of course, the upgrades are important, but these asphalt roads contribute to poor water absorption and potentially flash flooding. So, and they seem to deteriorate very quickly because the soil seems to move. So I'm just wondering if there's attention paid to that, and whether there is focus on newer street materials being looked at, or what the schedule should be for these type of repairs, those posts that get knocked down easily. And so very often, I'm not sure that there's budgeting for the repairs. As well as someone that doesn't use bike lanes as much, I'm unaware of many of the regulations. There were all different types of new electric devices, these 1-foot scooters, traditional scooters, e-bikes, motorcycles, bicycles, racing bicycles, tricycles. Frankly, I'm quite ignorant myself as to what's allowed where, what you need, what the rules and regulation. I noticed that for these electric bikes, there seem to have been some changes in San Diego County in terms of what is or is not required, what is finable. And so I would appreciate some direction as an uninformed citizen to learn more about it, just in a general sense. And I think that would markedly contribute to safety as well. Thank you for allowing these comments.
Thank you, Dr. Bailash. Okay, bringing it back to committee members for questions and comments. Stuart.
Thanks, and also thank you for your patience and waiting with us. We appreciate you being here. You know, I can't recall, I apologize, I can't recall, Ms. Matter, if you have been one of the individuals that's presented on this topic in the past. But one thing I recall is that the city had a practice of keeping in reserve balance approximately $20 million or something. I think if it wasn't you, some of your colleagues have talked about in the past. And I'm just curious, I applaud the utilization improvements, if you will. And also, by the way, I think highlighting that utilization rate on the slide itself, if you ever come back, if you're ever asked to come back to this, would be great, because that's something that we're obviously paying a lot of attention to. But can you speak to that question of whether you guys still have even an informal kind of, you know, sort of practice of keeping a balance of about $20 million, just so you want to have cash on hand, that kind of thing?
Thank you. Hopefully we will be back on an annual basis, so we'll make note of that. I don't know if we have a formal reserve policy, but Julio can address what's the appropriate amount basically to have on hand, because we do a lot of construction day in and day out. Julio?
Sure. Well, there is really no specific target that we should always have, but we should always have enough balance to support all current and future year encumbrances. So we're thinking about 25 to 30 million in fund balance.
Got it. Okay, so that's helpful. So just for everybody to understand, we're going to always, that utilization rate may continue to improve as revenues go up, but we're going to always see that cash balance in this kind of neighborhood, right?
Correct. Yes.
Got it. Okay. There was one other thing I was, actually, here it is. I almost lost my train of thought. That if I recall correctly, I believe the mayor had referenced sort of fixing potholes as perhaps even the second highest priority in his State of the City address, or it was pretty high up there if it wasn't second, which really is a question perhaps going back to our folks. I would assume that you guys might like to see more TransNet money eligible for maintenance, right? Right now we've got that 70-30 maintenance split. Yeah. And so in some respects, at least as far as TransNet funds, you're arguably limited in how much you can actually apply to maintenance. And so maybe I'll throw it back to our Sandag staff people. What's ever happened to that question about the board reconsidering the 70-30 split? Thanks.
Yes, so as part of the ordinance amendments effort, you'll recall we mentioned the mobility working group established a subcommittee, and they've been working on not only the local street and road, the types of eligible facilities under that local street and road pot of money, but also the recommendation from your audit that called for revisiting the 70-30 split. And so one of the items that would be brought forward for your consideration, as well as for the mobility working groups consideration and the board and so forth, is the removal of that 70-30 based on those discussions from that subcommittee. So that is something that we will be bringing forward in the near future.
Got it. So if I could just a little quick follow-up here. I remember in a prior presentation, there was a timeline about those different steps. I mean, can you update us just on what the timeline is likely to be? Thanks.
Yeah, so the subcommittee has already gone through discussions on some proposed amendments for the local street and road program, for the bike ped accommodation, which also resulted from your audit, revisiting that rule from the board policy. And they've also had discussions regarding the transit eligibility and transit operations provisions within the ordinance. So we anticipate being able to provide an update on that progress at the mobility working group sometime this spring. And that's consistent with the overall timeframe that we originally envisioned. So of course, some of these discussions take a little longer than others. So we're allowing for some cushion there or flexibility, but yeah, we anticipate coming forward in springtime.
Great, thanks. And thanks again for your patience.
Other comments, Sonny? Yes.
Thank you again for being here. I know you had to wait the whole meeting for this. It's always nice to hear from local jurisdictions that are using TransNet money. So thank you for your report. And we welcome you back anytime. I wanted to get a little bit more perspective on the 231 miles that you mentioned of road repairs that were done, if I have the number correctly. It sounds like a lot of miles, but what percentage of your total miles is that in the city? Because I know you cover such a large area. Can you give me some perspective on that?
Oh, boy. I used to have that number offhand because I used to be the pavement manager. It's a rough, in our network, it's about 3,000 miles, give or take 100 or so. So it's about 3,000 and what was the number?
That's okay. I don't need the exact number, but I'm just trying to get some perspective. So when you talk about the amount of miles, 230, so it's not even really 10% of your total miles. And I know you have an asset management program already, correct? But you're going to integrate it more. With the recent rains and the weather, your potholes have gotten bigger. I'm sure there are more roads that are in need of repair. What's your plan for catching up a little bit more or providing maybe a higher percentage of repairs based on, because the money seems to be available? How does that work? I mean, how do you program and manage that process, the fact that you had a big rain year and a lot more roads are in need of repair? Can you explain a little bit about that?
We're battling it on two fronts. The short term is we have city staff in our department. We call it an all hands on deck, where we're pothole patching and we're doing repairs 7 days a week right now. So that's the short term. The long term is we're actually hired a consultant to do a condition-wide network assessment of our roads, which should begin later this month. So they're going to drive every single paved road in the city and kind of catalog all the different types of distresses. And we will use that data to develop our strategy for the next 5 years on which street to do, because it's all about doing the right treatment on the right street at the right time. That's really what pavement preservation is all about. So the short term is all hands on deck. Long term is we're going to do an assessment and come up with a plan for the next 5 years. And the strategy for that 5-year plan is going to be based on the deferred unit cost method. So we want to capture streets before they drop off into a more expensive category of treatment. So it's all about timing. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information. Happy to follow up if needed.
No, I appreciate that. In assessing and prioritizing these repairs and projects, do you also consider equity to make sure that all areas of San Diego are equally measured, as far as, to reach out to areas that maybe are not as affluent or something like that? How does equity come into your priority settings?
For our short term, we actually have 9 crews assigned to each council district. So every council district is covered equally. When one maybe has a lighter load than another one, then they'll team up and double up as needed. The long-term strategy is we're working with our race and equity officer, Kim Desmond, in the city to come up with a priority to build that into our 5-year plan. So that will be included moving forward.
Thank you. I know this is a monumental task, and I know there's a lot of people probably calling you asking to fix their potholes, but we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. Pedro?
Yes. Gene, thank you. And it's nice to see you.
Thank you, Pedro.
You mentioned something at the end of the presentation, and it was almost like an afterthought, but I think it's a huge thing if what I heard is what I think I heard. You mentioned that you're looking at an enterprise-based system where you're going to input the condition of all of the infrastructure that the city has, so that based on that, you will make decisions on the life service of, let's say, a culvert, the pavement, the street light, and all of that. How long do you think that effort is going to take you? And did I hear correctly?
Yeah, it's been an ongoing thing. We hope to finalize it in the next few years, but it's definitely monumental, probably a little bit more monumental than we expected. And it's based on business risk exposure. So the probability of failure for an asset and the consequence. So there may be something that will likely fail, but maybe it has a lower consequence than something else. So we're going to take those two factors in. I can't speak to the actual timeline because that's really with our engineering capital project folks. I don't know if anybody from ECP has any information. Karen McGriff, the Assistant Director from Engineering and Capital Projects.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Karen McGriff, the Assistant Director, as Jean said, with the Engineering Capital Project Departments. I'm also running our project management office, which we're standing up and is kind of the central focus a little bit outside of IT of development of the EAM system, our enterprise asset management system. This is something that we have been working on for over 5 years now. There are some asset classes that are much more fully developed and used much more robustly within the EAM system. Our public utilities assets, for example, our water, sewer, those are well incorporated into the system. We've got our streets that are very well incorporated into the system that we're going to be using even more robustly once we have a good condition assessment data to rely on. And then we continue to build out, adding in the additional transportation data or various transportation assets. Our stormwater assets are being put in there. We're working on condition data, assessment data for our parks and our facilities assets that will all be incorporated. Eventually, this is designed to be a whole infrastructure asset for all infrastructure assets of the city. And one of the things that we will be incorporating as part of us doing street selection and balancing is the whole, what is not only the condition of the street, but also what is the condition and the replacement, the capital renewal cycle of the water, the infrastructure subsurface underneath the street, the water, the sewer, the storm drains, to kind of make this more one much more organized delivery of the total capital program. One quick follow-up on your equity question, Sunny, that you asked earlier. We actually in October implemented a new council policy on CIP prioritization that incorporates many factors in addition to safety and renewal and condition of the asset, as well as a lot of climate action plan things, some and big equity and inclusion and access, addition to access of the infrastructure. So it is a core component of our future capital projects.
As a follow-up, as an FYI, I think it was 6 years ago, I participated with the city of Chula Vista as a resident and in an advisory group that did basically what you're doing right now. They hired a firm that went ahead and did the survey of all of their infrastructure. And it took several years to get it done, but they were able to digitize all of the infrastructure so that, you could go with a barcode reader, for a lack of better, and identify that structure, its age, its service life, condition, all of the data. It was very, very powerful. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to contact the city of Chula Vista. I think it's Bill Valley that's leading that effort.
Several years ago, we hired the same firm for our stormwater asset management plan. So our stormwater department has a good asset management plan by the same firm. And actually the transportation department, we have an RFP right now for an as-needed consultant that we're going to bring on board. And one of the tasks that we hope to have that consultant do is to help us do the same thing for that stormwater did, public utilities, with the goal of something similar to Chula Vista. We're well aware of what Chula Vista did.
Great. Do you know what the current payment condition index is for the city?
Our last assessment was 2016, so we don't have, I don't remember what that was. 72? 72, yeah. It's gone down since then because we have not been fully funded. So I don't know what it is now. We're all taking bets at the office what it's going to be once we do this assessment. So we should know hopefully this time next year.
I would be very interested to find that out, and I'm sure you probably are going to highly publicize that. But having worked at a city, and by no means don't take it as a criticism, but having a 20 million to a 30 million balance, I would have killed you guys for that money in Santee when we were only getting like maybe $5 or $7 million. So, you know, maybe you could spend more, I guess is what I would say. Looking at it as another municipality looking at you guys. And lastly, and again, don't take it as a criticism, it's just my humble opinion. I see a lot of slurry seals where I don't think you should be doing a slurry seal, that it should be another strategy. So hopefully, once you're done with your new payment condition survey, you can look at the strategies or why did you pick the strategy that you picked for that area. Because, you know, sometimes the street that you're putting a slurry seal looks to me more like it needed a total reconstruction. But those are my thoughts. And thank you very much.
Interesting you brought that up. We're actually looking to incorporate a few more surface treatments in our quiver. So next year, we're actually going to incorporate a couple others, such as, I don't know if you're familiar with a scrub seal or a cape seal, but we're looking at those, and those will most likely be incorporated into our payment management strategy next year.
If you ever are curious, there's a gentleman by the name of John Cochran, and he runs a company called Manhole Adjusters. And he is the inventor of a couple of chip seals, the inventor of scrub seals, the inventor of double armored chip seals. I mean, reach out to him. He's a wealth of information, and you could see some of the strategies. He does a lot of work for the city of Chula Vista, and he also does a ton of work in Imperial Valley, which some of the strategies that he does there, to me, it's unbelievable, the great condition of some of those payments based on the treatments that he's doing and how harsh the environment is over there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Yes, Michael.
Welcome. The last time you were before us, you in your presentation, you had maybe a little bit from your Vision Zero, just the cover of your Vision Zero, and you mentioned that. Can you talk a little bit about the projects that you're doing that are just directed at safety?
Well, we have a traffic engineering division, which comprises of about 80 staff. Most of them are traffic engineers, and day in and day out, the work that they do is all safety related, and that's the team that Everett works in. So they evaluate based on requests for all-way stop signs, crosswalks at certain areas, curb ramps, other traffic calming devices, VCOMs, Hawks, everything else. So day in and day out, that crew, those teams do hundreds of evaluations for safety. On a programmatic level, we do our resurface repurpose whenever we're going to do any work on a street, and the street's either going to be slurry sealed or overlaid. Once that work's done, that gives us like a blank canvas to really reconfigure the striping. Do we want to add a bike lane? Do we want to add a buffer? And we do that for every street that we're going to resurface or slurry. We evaluate that. Not every street gets a realignment, but we evaluate those based on our bicycle master plan alignment as well. Gosh, what else? Everett, can you think of any other Vision Zeros? I mean, we have, roundabouts. Yeah, we have a roundabout program where we have several in our engineering capital projects in design now. We're doing a big project on University Avenue right now. We've actually done a experimental modular roundabout with recycled materials on Florida Avenue. I don't know if you've seen any of the social media on that. We got a federal grant for that. So we're evaluating that as well. Anything else, guys, did I forget? Flashing beacons and hawks, yeah, those are all, once our team of engineers evaluates, and if it meets the criteria, we will either install it with our city crews, our electricians, or if the work is really complicated, a lot of trenching's involved, then we'll have our engineering capital project staff do the basic design and then hire a contractor to do that. So that's some of the processes that we use. Does that answer some of your questions?
It does.
Okay.
Safety criteria is becoming more prevalent, say, in the past 10, 15 years than it had been in the past, where we were kind of focused on capacity. So I'm just interested to hear what TransNet monies are being spent solely on safety projects, because that seems to be a worsening concern with pedestrian accidents, bicycle accidents. So,
yeah.
And I know as you go, so goes the region. So I'm interested to kind of keep track of those projects that you do for safety. And a similar note to Sunny's question about pavement management, there had been a process in the past where overlays would follow the sewer and water group and the undergrounding district, so you wouldn't do a paving project and immediately cut it up. So that was kind of the schedule. Those two events would occur on a residential street, and then the paving whatever paving treatment was necessary would follow. At least the undergrounding districts I know have kind of fallen behind. SDG&E stopped work for a little bit, and now they're struggling to get transformers. And those projects are starting to slip in schedule, and maybe the sewer and water groups, I don't know, they got to get pipe. Maybe is that pushing out the ability to pave these streets, and is that longer schedule causing those streets to go in a higher category of repair, which also takes a lot longer time to? Has those two types of projects caused any problem with your pavement management program?
Well, the utility undergrounding, that program typically does about 10 miles a year. So when those are delayed a little bit, it does add a little bit of hiccup, but when we're doing 200 or 300 miles a year, the delay of a few miles doesn't significantly slow down our overall program, but we do have to adjust when those projects are delayed as well, because we're the last ones there, so sometimes we do have to wait and coordinate.
Okay. And the last question about pavement management. In the past, there's always been kind of a priority list of roads based on probably the 2016 assessment of where they were at. Is it your understanding that your new asset management would adjust that priority list and reshuffle kind of the order of which roads would get done relative to what expectations had been in the past?
Yeah, we expect a new list to come out based on condition, but we're also including in a component of equity in the next iteration of our 5-year strategy. So we expect it to change.
Yeah. Okay. Significantly? I mean, bad streets are still bad streets. I am worried about my street, but it's a general question. The process is slow. I mean, every 20 years or so, maybe a street would get overlaid, and if you're going to start moving that date 5 years or such, I mean that could be a counterintuitive result for some people that have been looking forward to roadway.
Yeah, well, we're hoping to eliminate significant delays causing more costly repairs. That's what our strategy is going to be, and that's why we're focused on deferred unit costs. So we don't want to defer something if it's going to cost more. However, we do have a very limited budget. We don't have an unlimited budget, so some tough decisions are going to have to be made when we actually put pen to paper with our budget.
Well, keep up the good work, and thank you.
Thanks.
Jane, I believe I heard that the city is coming up with a new policy that deals when utilities are trenching streets to do a little bit a better job at rehabilitating that. Is that still going on?
So you're probably referring to our street preservation ordinance. We have a current ordinance in place that requires excavators, whether it's internal or external, to do some proper street restoration. We are evaluating that ordinance. There are some proposed changes. Nothing's final yet. We're still working with the telecom industry, and we hope to have a final version to the city council probably this spring. But there are some recommended changes from staff based on one of the things is multimodal safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. So, but it's currently a work in progress, but we are looking at that ordinance.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Gene, you just mentioned the difficult decisions that you have to make. Who ultimately is responsible for making those calls?
Well, the mayor proposes the budget and the city council approves it. So it's ultimately those two entities. We do provide some recommendations based on, sound science, but ultimately it's the city council.
Thank you. Yes, Stuart.
Thanks. Follow up to Pedro's earlier comment, and thank you for expressing your humble opinion about the cash balance. It's reassuring to know that when I term off, that there will be at least one of the committee members who'll keep a spotlight on that question. But I don't think this has come up we've got a number of people who have just been on for a couple of years or so. I don't know that's come up. So I'm wondering if, Andre, could you speak to the notion that if hypothetically the city of San Diego or any city spends down their balances but has a perhaps unforeseen need or just a short-term need, could you just refresh or educate us all a little bit about the opportunity for the jurisdictions to access the commercial paper program that SANDAG has? And then also in particular, if next week a city said, oh my gosh, we actually need a few $1 million we didn't realize, what's the time frame from them recognizing they have a need to actually being able to access money under that short-term commercial paper program? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I think, we have used a commercial paper program, probably 8 or 9 or 10 cities have actually used it. And generally what we need is some kind of a resolution from their boards requesting our board. So once we get that document and we actually run the cash flow analysis to make sure that they have, we look at what they're requesting and make sure that we have sufficient cash flows in the future to pay for it, we can take it to our board within a month. So once we get the resolution, we run the cash flow numbers so long as it's agendized. So realistically, from the time we get a letter to from the time that the city could get funding, it could be 2 or 3 months. And that's happened like that in the past. I think the last city was maybe City of San Marcos that needed some urgent money. We were able to turn it around pretty quickly. And although short-term interest rates, for example, right now, the federal fund rate is 4.75, we're still only paying about 1.5% on our commercial paper. So because it's tax exempt, it's really beneficial to the cities to borrow against our commercial paper. So that's always a good program for them to borrow against.
Great, thanks. So, I'm turning off, but next year you come back, Pedro is going to ask you the question. What about using that commercial paper program so you can get that balance down just a little more?
I'm sure he will.
Thank you.
You do have one already, right? There is one on the City of San Diego, 26 million commercial paper program availability. So that it's not new to you. So message is spend down the 30 million.
Thank you. Well, seeing no further questions, I want to thank again the City of San Diego and all the staff for taking the time to be with us. We always appreciate your presentation, being the largest jurisdiction in the region. It's always really interesting to see how you're utilizing these TransNet funds. So thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next year. Okay, and with that, our next regular meeting will be Wednesday, March 8th. Here at 9:30 a.m. And that concludes our agenda, and we're adjourned, everyone. Thank you so much.